Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another installment of the Wayne Public Library Virtual Jazz Series. And today I have the great pleasure of talking with pianist and vibraphonist Alex Collins. So, welcome today.
Thank you so much for having me, Patty. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to talk to you, and I'm so happy that I got to see you this about a week and a half ago when you performed as part of our collaborative series at Our Lady of Consolation Church. Information about that concert will be at the end of this recording, so you can watch it on our YouTube page. But you performed with John Lee on bass, Freddie Hendrix on trumpet, Carl Latham on drums, and you were the amazing pianist that day. And boy, you were on fire.
Oh, thank you so much, Patty. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to perform for the Wayne Public Library at the Consolation Church in Wayne.
I gotta tell you, watching, I don't know what I enjoyed more. Well, of course, I enjoyed the music, but I enjoyed watching Freddie Hendrix's reactions when you were playing,
Oh,
because
wow.
he is very animated and he makes wonderful expressions of just appreciation for what you were doing. And it was very evident. And John Lee as well. There's such a symbiosis between the four of you. You've played together a long time, and it shows. And there's an unspoken language, and just the smiles and the raised eyebrows that would sometimes show up on John and Freddie's faces when you were doing something wonderful. It's exciting to see that as an audience member.
Oh, thank you. Well, I felt the same way about their playing. It's a lot of fun to play with all of them, and they're all such world-class musicians. So, I just try to soak in every experience that I get to play with them, and it's really just a treat for me.
So let's go a little bit back through your beginnings here. So when you started piano, I assume is in your youth, did you ever pursue any other instruments?
I did. So I did start with piano. That was my first instrument, and obviously the instrument that I've pursued professionally. I also played alto saxophone, and I played that in middle school and in high school. I played lead alto saxophone senior year in my high school jazz band as well. So that was a lot of fun. And to this day, for enjoyment, I practice also guitar, acoustic guitar, and singing, just because I love it. But I don't pursue those professionally at the moment.
That's really interesting, and I love the fact that you're doing that for your own enjoyment. That I think there are things that people are like, oh, you should do that as a career, or put that into your career, but sometimes it's more precious or more important to just have it for yourself. So that's
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Do you play professionally vibraphones now still?
I don't at the moment. The story with the vibraphone was, this is a great story. So I had done a couple of records with an incredible drummer and composer named Jerry Gibbs. And Jerry Gibbs is the son of the great Terry Gibbs, very famous vibraphonist. So Jerry says, I want you to play some vibraphone on my next record. So I did 2 records with Jerry. So this is the second record I did with Jerry. And he was living in New York City at the time. So he says, okay, I'm going to lend you one of my dad's vibraphones. So in my apartment, I had this vibraphone of Terry Gibbs. And I was learning vibraphone on the vibraphone of Terry Gibbs. So I even took a vibraphone lesson with Terry Gibbs. I mean, and it was incredible. And I always enjoyed playing the vibraphone. I haven't been playing it lately as Jerry. I had to return the vibraphone to Jerry when he moved. But I love the instrument. It's a great instrument, and of course, I love Terry Gibbs playing. I mean, he's one of the finest that ever lived, and so it was really weird, when you play an instrument that is signed by a legend. It was signed by Terry Gibbs, and you're playing this instrument. It has all the mojo of Terry Gibbs in that vibraphone. And, me just kind of trying to play the vibraphone. You're like, wow, like I'm playing Terry Gibbs vibraphone. So there you go.
Did you absorb that mojo and instill it in yourself?
I want to believe that I did, but I don't know. I mean, it's the great Terry Gibbs. So if I just absorbed one small piece of a percent of it, I'm satisfied, you know?
Well, so don't they say that sometimes the best we can hope for is to aspire to be like those that we admire?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just, to get to experience these masters any way you can, For me, just getting to take a lesson with him was really a special treat. And, I'm grateful that Jerry was willing to hook me up with his dad to take that lesson.
That's a very special memory and something to carry with you forever.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about your education. You
Sure.
got your bachelor's degree from the Eastman School of Music, and then you got your master's at the Manhattan School of Music. What
Absolutely.
were those experiences like for you?
Okay. So when I went to Eastman, one of the reasons I went to Eastman School of Music was not only did we get a great jazz education, but we received a great classical education. So how it worked was the first 2 years you had to study classical piano, was your were all your lessons were classical piano, and the second 2 years, the lessons were jazz. So while I was there, I got a classical education, I got a jazz education. I took all the jazz composition classes, all the way from tune writing to big band to the orchestra. I wrote for strings as well. Um, Classical lessons were great. I studied with a teacher named Tony Carami, a wonderful musician teacher, and he actually is a specialist in ragtime music, so that was really hip. And then my second 2 years, my primary piano teacher was a famous jazz musician named Harold Danko. And Harold Danko played with a lot of people from Lee Konitz to Thad Jones, Mel Lewis. And Harold's lessons were extraordinarily deep because he tells me when I'm studying with him, he says, Alex, you're not training to be a jazz musician. You're training to be an all-around musician. And at the time, I was obsessed with jazz. I still am, of course. But one of the things he talked to me about was he said, study all types of music, study classical pieces, read through whatever composers you love, regardless of whether they're jazz or not, and you'll take from it what you take from it. So to this day, I'm always digging through all types of music that's not just jazz to add different colors to my playing for whether it's jazz or something else. And I think a lot of artists that we admire have an interesting palette of colors that are unique to them. So as I'm trying to grow and trying to evolve as an artist, I know that the more colors that I take from other composers and artists, the more likely I am to become one with my own voice.
That's very well put. And wasn't Stravinsky influenced by jazz and vice versa? Do I have the right
I
composer?
I think so. I mean, there are definitely some elements in Stravinsky's music that are jazz-like. I don't want to say officially what I know or don't know, but I definitely hear jazz elements in Stravinsky's music.
Eastman School of Music is in Rochester, is it not?
It is.
They've got
Yes.
quite the jazz festival every fall, every June.
They do have
Um,
a very well-known jazz festival. Yes.
I haven't made it there yet. I go frequently to Saratoga to their jazz festival, and I
Oh,
almost made it to Montreal, but that's still on my bucket list.
cool. Yeah, yeah. You know what? Sadly, I haven't been to their jazz festival either, because it would always be in the summer, and I would always be back home when I was in college during the summers, so I never got to go. But I do want to go one time. I mean, it looks like an amazing festival.
Now
And
you're
I
based in New York City right now, but did you grow
yes.
up in New York City?
No, I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is near New York, so easy enough to get there. And I was already taking lessons. I took lessons in high school with a pianist in New York named Mike Ladon. So I was already kind of absorbing a bit of the New York scene. And when I was in high school, I also went to this program. This is where I met Mike Ladon at NJ Pack in Newark, the Jazz for Teens program, which had all these premier New York musicians on the faculty. So I studied with Mike there all 4 years of high school. And then my last 2 years of high school, I studied with Mike also privately at his apartment in New York City.
Well, he teaches up at William Patterson,
Yes.
and
Okay.
but yeah, he's prolific. I see him all over the place. I knew you were from Teaneck. I totally forgot. And the
All
fact
good.
that you posted that Freddie Hendrix, Kalen Cardello, and you all attended Teaneck High
Teaneck
School,
High
all
School.
different
Yep.
years.
Yep. It's amazing, it was so great meeting Kalen at at the church because I had never met him before that gig. So when I met him, it was we had met online. I had heard Kalen play on videos, and of course I thought he was amazing, but I never had the opportunity to meet him in person until that the gig at the church. So that was really cool.
So speaking of meeting, the first time I had the great pleasure of meeting you, I had a note was in 2023 when you performed here in June with John Lee and Carl Latham.
Yes, I remember that.
And we have that recording on our YouTube page, and boy, you're on fire for that
Oh,
one. And then I
thank you.
saw you again in 2024 in Ramsey.
That's right. Hmm.
And then, but I was thinking about this, and I realized that the first time I didn't meet you in person, but the first time I came across your music was through one of Carl Latham's Cabin in the Woods in 2020 during the pandemic,
I
and you were
remember
performing
that.
with James Robbins, the bassist, and Carl Latham.
Sure.
And that's the first time that you kind of got on my radar. And yeah, it's just been wonderful to get to know you over these years.
Back at you, Patty. It's been wonderful to get to know you too.
Thank you. So, let's talk about your debut was at Tanglewood Jazz Festival, another great jazz festival, was in 2010 with the Brandon Wright Quartet. That must
Mhm.
have been quite an experience.
It was an experience. Brandon is an incredible tenor saxophonist, woodwind player, and he works around the city both as a jazz musician. I believe he's one of the primary people on a famous Broadway show. I don't want to say which one because I can't remember off the top of my head, but he's very in demand. He's a very in demand musician. So that was a treat. And I remember that day we were playing, and the main act was John Pizzarelli. So we were opening on a stage that was right to the side of it before he was performing. And yeah, it was really just an amazing opportunity to perform at such a famous, venue for artists.
I saw Steely Dan in that venue with Chris Potter when he was
Oh,
like in his 20s. This is a really long time ago. And then I'm going to see him this Sunday at William Patterson.
oh,
He's
very nice.
performing. So
Very Chris Potter's incredible. I mean, really just an innovator on that instrument. I'll tell you, he just does things that are so unique and amazing and very musical, of course, as well.
he looks exactly the same as when I saw him in the 90s, which is
Really?
really unfair.
Cool. I mean, I heard Chris Potter was one of those people that was like was incredible super young, like a total prodigy. But of course, I never heard him until he was already an adult. So of course he sounds incredible now, but I heard he sounded like at 14 or something like that. He was already, playing as great as the top pros.
If I could just have a little ounce of like just a fingernail that talent for myself, they can have the rest. But so let's talk about some of your influences. Who are the musicians that classical or any genre and jazz influences?
Classical and jazz influences. Well, with classical influences, I'm always playing through music. Every day I get to practice, I'm reading through classical music. So right now, I'm reading through the Chopin etudes, the Godofsky Chopin etudes. So what those are, a famous composer named Leopold Godofsky took the Chopin etudes, and what he did is he made them harder. So I know it's like, well, the Chopin etudes are already hard enough. Like, what else can you do with them? He took some of them and he created left-hand versions, meaning that the left hand is playing both the melody and the accompaniment. It's incredibly hard. And then he also took versions where he took the right hand and the left hand, and he put the right hand in the left hand and the left hand in the right hand, put it in a black key instead of a white key, and then did something even harder. So I explore a lot of these pieces slowly. I mean, I'm not necessarily trying to play them at tempo anytime soon, but I'm just exploring all the different ways you can look at the instrument. So I enjoy those. And a lot of other composers, whether it's Ernesto Lacona, Isaac Albanese, Debussy, Ravel, Chopin, of course, you name it. I'm always looking for more composers to just study and learn how they approach the instrument and just put colors inside of my palette so whenever the moment strikes where I get inspired in a way, maybe something will come out. I don't actively try to impose what I'm practicing in real time in an improvisational setting, but I do know that the more I study, the more likely interesting elements are to come out when I'm playing with people.
Do you compose also classical pieces, kind of like Mary Lou Williams? Do you want to compose classically based orchestra?
Um, I have. I don't right now, I've been busy more playing, but everyone's telling me to get back to it. So I think I better, just have a moment to kind of just think about writing rather than, going to the next gig. Cause so much right now, I feel like I'm going from gig to gig to gig, and it's so great. And I'm taking in so much information that I need to almost have a moment to process that information so I can write. That's one of the things about New York. It's so quick. There's so many different experiences, and, different band leaders are helping me to develop in different ways. But in that experience, because I'm processing so much, it's hard to just allow everything to settle so I can write.
That's a problem with being creative. I do writing, and you have to find a quiet pocket of
Yeah,
time and a quiet
absolutely.
space where you're not interrupted to be able, as you said, to absorb all this, to then be able to assimilate it and then present as it will be in your form. And this is where it's very hard. Your Instagram page I follow, and that information will be at the end of this interview.
Cool.
But yes, you're all over the place. I can't keep up with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I've been playing with so many of the best, and they are very cool to me. They're very encouraging, and these individuals share their wisdom, and they really help me to grow. And they're patient with me, as I'm learning about the concepts that they're talking to me about. Everything takes time. So they've been really cool in allowing me to kind of grow at my own pace.
So, who are your jazz influences on piano?
On piano. Wow, I have a lot. Um, Bill Evans, I love Art Tatum, Oscar Peterson, Phineas Newborn, Chick Corea, Bud Powell. I just started studying Thelonious Monk in more depth. There was a long period of time where I just hadn't really put in my time to study him. I always appreciated him, but so I'm just beginning my Thelonious Monk study. In terms of more modern guys, I love Gonzalo Rubalcaba, love Brad Maldau. Oh, I forgot to mention in terms of guys of the past, Keith Jarrett, of course. Um, did I say McCoy Tyner?
No, not yet.
Okay, McCoy Tyner, love him. I got to meet McCoy Tyner when I was 16. That was a great experience. I'll tell you about that later. But yeah, a lot of people. I think I'd probably say similar people to everybody. I think it's more about how these musicians each influence us is what makes us all unique. I think a lot of us kind of survey the same masters that we get to learn from. And then, of course, there are the musicians. Well, but that's a different topic that I've gotten to play with that have influenced me, but they're not piano players, of course.
Who are the non-musicians that excuse me, non-pianists that you are influenced by?
Okay, non-pianists. So I would say the first thing is the musicians that I get to work with that are band leaders. So I get to work with I've been in John Lee's um trio and quartet since the top of 2019. So now we're into 2025. So we're looking at that, yeah, 6 years or so. And that's been incredible. For the people that are listening to this interview that don't know John Lee's work, I know you know all about John Lee. He was the musical director for Dizzy Gillespie, also was in McCoy Tyner's band, many others, and he's an incredible bass player. And
And
just a
just a really nice guy.
oh, a wonderful guy, the best guy. And he's not just a great jazz musician, he understands music at a very, very high level. So he really has been able to give me, whether he speaks to me about his wisdom, about tips and how to grow, or just by playing with me, just by being around him, I pick up he's opened up certain dimensions to me about the music that I don't think I would have um, grasped certainly as quickly if I didn't have the experiences playing with him. So that's been great. And he also leads the Dizzy Gillespie All Stars. So occasionally I go out with them. Then another person I work with all the time is Ronnie Barrage.
Mm.
And Ronnie Barrage is an incredible drummer, very different from John. They're both, equally incredible and have equally great resumes. And Ronnie is someone who leads a band where you wouldn't just call it jazz. There's jazz in it, but there's other elements from, funk, R&B, African music, classical music, everything. And Ronnie's big thing with me, this is what Ronnie taught me. Ronnie said, "Look, I want you to sound different every time. I never want you to play the same thing twice." So I started thinking about them like, well, how do I play things that are totally fresh and unique when you're playing night after night with the same person? And then I thought to myself, that really is the purpose of improvisation. Like that's really what we're supposed to be doing as improvisers. So he started getting me to rethink how I was visualizing improvisation so that I wasn't just taking little pieces of material from other artists and putting them inside of myself, but rather trying to create like in real time. And that was deep. And he said to me, he says, "Look, if you fall flat on your face on stage, we'll catch you. It's cool. This is what this music is really about. It's like about creating and improvising." So he was great for that. And Ronnie would always put together these great bands. Like he'd put every band I've worked with Ronnie has been like top of the game. And other cats that have been in those bands, like the great Greg Osby, the great Lonnie Plaxico, they've all had helpful wisdom to me in helping me to find my own material, to find my own voice. And so that whole unit has been extremely educational for me, you know. And then I've also worked with the great Carl Latham, who you know very well, and I've worked in his bands. And Carl has a lot of deep concepts as well. He's a very versatile drummer. He likes to say he lives in the land of in between jazz, funk, R&B, textural. So he's kind of opened my sound up a lot too to other types of music. And oh, and lastly, I can't forget about Jerry Gibbs. I did 2 records with him, and he was all about interesting music from the 1970s, whether it be jazz, fusion, progressive rock. I didn't know much about music from the 70s prior to Jerry Gibbs, and he really opened up my ears and really also encouraged me to kind of find my own voice as well.
You've had some really great mentors, and that's one
Yeah.
of the things I was talking about with Don Braden and John Lee, and also even Benny Bannock the third is just
Mhm.
back in the day, or Steve Laspina too. Is back in the day you used to have these older gentlemen or band leaders, female or male, that would take the younger ones under their wing and really kind of mentor them, and because back in the day you did not have an education program the way that
Mhm.
we do have now with all the different schools. So it's nice to see that this is continuing.
Yeah, it's really special, and I just feel um lucky to have gotten to meet these people and for them to have space to to call me for gigs, to um you know to have conversations with me, and also just to kind of be patient as I grow into concepts and dimensions that they believe need to be there for the music to really um speak. I mean, I know I've worked very hard over the years at my craft and I continue to, but you still need to be in the right place at the right time. You still need, when you meet one of these masters, for them to have a space for you to play with them. I met John Lee in, I believe it was like the fall maybe of 2017, maybe 20, yeah, it was maybe fall of 2017. Could have been fall of 2016. I'm not really sure. Um, Maybe it could have been that early. But I remember I didn't end up working with him till the winter of 2019. because it just didn't align. We had a great gig, we had a great conversation, everything was great, and we had communicated back and forth, and everything was awesome. And then somehow we missed each other because he was on the road, and so we didn't end up seeing each other till 2019. And I was like, and it's funny. So timing is a thing, like you have to. It's not only about meeting them and connecting, but it's about connecting when they have a space to call you for some work, and you know. So
That's
I'm
how I
lucky.
feel about this interview program. It started off very organically in the pandemic because we needed to pivot to create online programming.
Sure.
And so this is how it kind of started, and it was affiliated with people from William Patterson, and it's kind of grown from there. But the way the interviews kind of come to me and I request them, it's all very organic, and it's just when it kind of feels right and it happens. And that's where I feel very blessed.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're talking about having a lot of gigs. You're talking about not having enough time to do compositions. So this is where you opted to now start teaching 2 days a week. So I'm curious where that time is available to you, and to also piggyback on what we were just saying, you're now giving your time and your availability to these younger musicians, which is wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, teaching's been great. I think about so I teach at the County College of Morris. I do that 2 days a week, and I teach something called piano labs. And I teach private lessons to the piano majors. So the piano labs are classes for, there are two types of piano labs. One are for music majors who don't study piano as their primary instrument, and the other are for anybody. And in these labs, the ones that are for anybody, students, wherever their level is, they practice piano at that level. And I come around and I work with each of them individually for a few minutes each class, and I kind of coach them twice a week and help them keep developing. And then the piano class for majors, that aren't piano majors, is to help all musicians who are music majors learn a certain amount of piano, so that they can have an understanding of music as a whole. So that's been a real joy. Um, in That's been really great to have that opportunity. And then the private lessons are piano majors as well. And the thing about teaching piano, all young musicians, is you're trying to, one, inspire them, trying to get them um, more deeply interested in music, and also giving them tools to become better at learning it on their own, to become better students of music, to become more disciplined. And by disciplined, I don't just mean practice longer. I mean practice more deeply, be more patient with the practice, look for more details, things like that.
I'm assuming, like many of the other musicians I've had the pleasure of speaking with who are also educators, that you encourage them to listen to live music as much as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no substitute for listening to live music. And I think with everything being on YouTube and things like that, sometimes people aren't going out enough to hear music in a real setting. I mean, there's nothing like being in the room with the musicians, experiencing their souls connecting with each other and with the listeners in real life.
It is. It's a totally different experience, and yeah, I agree that the internet has been a wonderful thing. And of course, it was the only thing that we had during the pandemic. But the ability now to hear great music or free music in our jazz series that we have, the two here in Wayne. Yeah, I can't encourage enough. And that's one of the reasons I present it. Is to be able
Yeah.
to make sure it's available. So. Let's talk a little bit about your compositions. When you start to compose a piece, do you start with a feeling of a song? You want it to be a specific type, like a bossa nova? Are you inspired by a person, or could it just be Rini Rosnes was inspired by a bird in her backyard?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I think if anything, I hear a melody because of whatever inspired me. Sometimes I'm not sure. It's like a lot of times I think that my favorite beginnings to compositions are like, I don't want to say lightning in a bottle, but it's kind of like something just hits you and I write it down. Usually it's just a melody and some basic harmony. I like that approach before, but it could also be a groove. Maybe I just am inspired by a groove and then that groove becomes the beginning of the tune and then I try to write a melody that I know will fit with a groove. So there are no rules, but I would say in general something has to hit me,
Right.
you know. That's how I would say the beginning of it is.
So when you have your song, you have your composition, do you
Yeah.
decide, okay, this is going to be something that I want to have performed in a trio or a quintet, or I'm going to do an orchestral, a big band arrangement of it. Does that come into play?
Hmm. I think as I'm further along with the composition, you start to kind of hear possible orchestration ideas. I don't think about that initially. Like, I don't think when I begin a composition, oh, that's going to be for orchestra. Oh, that's going to be for um, a big band, or that's going to be for a trio. I think midway through you start to kind of hear, oh wow, this melody would sound nice with strings, or this would sound nice with horns, or oh, I could hear this type of drum beat, but not necessarily at the beginning. And maybe sometimes you might hear one thing at the beginning, but later on you realize it's something totally different than what you originally thought it was going to be.
So if you were to be able to have put together your own band and have whoever you wanted, who would you have?
Oh, I don't know. That's a really really hard question because there's a lot of musicians I really love. And so many of them, the one thing I will say about bands in general is that whoever I'm playing with, I really feel they should be their authentic selves. Like, I'm not the type of band leader that ever wants to control what musicians sound like. So I know that whatever musicians you call, I believe we should let them be themselves. And so there's a lot of different colors that I feel like a lot of musicians would bring out the best in me in different ways, and I'd be thrilled to get to play with them. I mean, I can tell you, I've been from working with Ronnie Barrage and working with John Lee and Carl Latham and Lonnie Plaxico and Greg Osby, all these great people. They all pull something out of me that I feel like, oh wow, these people are or Jerry Gibbs. They all pull something out of me, and I go, wow, these people are incredible. And when I hear the playback or something I did, I go, what was coming from me, and what was really inspired from them that ended up combining with what I hear to create a sound. Because jazz is very collaborative. So even though maybe one person's taking a solo, it's so inspired by the musicians that you're playing with. So I don't want to say that I have one set dream band because I think so many different people would make me happy, to play with.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Well, this has been such a pleasure. I appreciate your taking the
Oh,
time. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think this was great. Thank you. Been a pleasure for me too, Patty. Thank you so much for having me.